To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. Brett Cunningham stood in his corner office on the 42nd floor, surveying the Chicago skyline with the satisfaction of a man who'd built his empire from nothing. At 38, he'd transformed a small tech startup into Cunningham Solutions, a cybersecurity firm that protected Fortune 500 companies from digital threats. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent his career safeguarding others from invisible dangers, never imagining the real threat would come from within his own home. His phone buzzed. Cassie's name lit up the screen with a text. Landed in Miami. Conference starts tomorrow. Miss you already, Red Heart. Brett smiled, typing back. Miss you too. Kill it at that presentation. They'd been married for 7 years, and Cassie Mercado, now Cunningham, was everything he'd thought he wanted. Beautiful, charismatic, with an MBA from Northwestern and a high-powered career in pharmaceutical sales. They'd met at a charity gala, and within 6 months, Brett had proposed on a beach in Santorini. Their wedding had been featured in Chicago Magazine's society pages. But lately, something felt off. Cassie had become distant, distracted. She'd started going to more conferences, staying out later with clients, and their conversations had devolved into logistics about whose turn it was to pick up dry cleaning. Brett had dismissed it as the natural ebb and flow of marriage, the price of 2 ambitious careers. He'd decided to surprise her with a gesture, hiring a professional cleaning service to deep clean the house while she was away. When she returned from Miami, everything would be pristine, and maybe they could reconnect over a home-cooked dinner and a good bottle of wine. It seemed romantic, thoughtful. His assistant, Lynn Zuniga, knocked on his open door. Brett, your 3 o'clock is here. The Jennings account. Right, thanks, Lynn. Send them in. The afternoon blurred past in a series of meetings, contract negotiations, and strategic planning sessions. It was nearly 6 when Brett finally closed his laptop and headed home to his Lincoln Park brownstone. The house would be empty without Cassie, but he'd planned to catch up on some reading, maybe hit the gym in their basement. His phone rang as he pulled into the driveway. Unknown number. Mr. Cunningham? A woman's voice, trembling, barely above a whisper. This is Barbara McCormick from Sparkle Clean Services. I can't stay here, sir. You need to come home. Now. Brett's stomach dropped. What? I am home. I mean, I'm pulling in now. What's wrong? I'm outside. On your lawn. I can't. Please, just come. The line went dead. Brett threw the car into park and bolted from the vehicle. Barbara McCormick sat on his front lawn, her cleaning supplies scattered around her, mascara running down her face in black rivulets. She was maybe 50, with kind eyes that now held pure terror. Mrs. McCormick? Barbara. Brett crouched beside her. What happened? She pointed a shaking finger toward the house. The master bedroom closet. I was dusting the top shelf, and the box fell. I saw what was inside. Mr. Cunningham, I'm so sorry, but you need to see this. Brett helped her to her feet, his mind racing through possibilities. Drugs? Something of his late mother's that might be disturbing? He'd inherited this house from his parents 5 years ago. Maybe there were old family secrets he didn't know about? He guided Barbara to the front steps. Stay here. I'll call someone to drive you home. Are you hurt? No, just, please be careful. Brett entered his home, every sense heightened. The house smelled of lemon cleaner and lavender. Everything looked normal. The hardwood floors gleamed. The living room was immaculate. He climbed the stairs to the master bedroom, his heart hammering. The closet door stood open. Cassie's side, specifically. The top shelf was usually storage for seasonal items. Winter scarves, beach bags, old purses. Now, a cardboard box lay open on the floor, its contents spilled like entrails. Brett's knees nearly gave out. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. But these weren't cherished memories. They were surveillance photos of him, walking to his car, entering his office, having dinner with clients. Each photo was dated, going back months. There were printed emails, highlighted passages about his schedule, his habits, his routines. And there was more. A burner phone, a ledger with dates and dollar amounts. A passport, Cassie's passport, but with a different name, Catherine Mercer. But what made Brett's blood run cold was the small glass vial labeled with a chemical compound he recognized from a cybersecurity conference about corporate espionage. A tasteless, odorless substance that caused heart attacks. Untraceable if administered properly. Beneath it all was a handwritten note in Cassie's distinctive looping script. Timeline moved up. He suspects nothing. Policy pays out double for accidental death. 2 weeks, then we're free. See. The room spun. Brett sat down hard on the bedroom floor, his analytical mind trying to process the impossible. His wife was planning to kill him. For insurance money. With someone else, a we. 7 years of marriage. 7 years of trust, of building a life together. All of it a lie. His phone was in his hand before he consciously decided to use it. 911. What's your emergency? My name is Brett Cunningham. I need police at my residence immediately. I've discovered evidence of a planned murder. His voice sounded distant, robotic. My murder. Chapter 2. The investigation begins. Detective Harry Vasquez arrived within 20 minutes, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers and a crime scene technician. Vasquez was a veteran of Chicago PD's Homicide Division, 45 years old, with graying temples and eyes that had seen too much. But those eyes sharpened when he examined the contents of the box. Mr. Cunningham, I need you to walk me through this from the beginning, Vasquez said, pulling out a notebook. And don't touch anything else. Brett recounted the afternoon, the cleaning service, Barbara's panic call, the discovery. Vasquez listened intently, occasionally jotting notes, his expression growing darker with each detail. The chemical compound in that vial, Vasquez said, we'll need to test it, but if it's what you think it is, we're talking about premeditated murder. The surveillance photos alone are evidence of stalking and conspiracy. He paused. Where's your wife now? Miami. A pharmaceutical conference at the Fontainebleau. She left this morning. Vasquez exchanged a glance with one of the officers. We'll need to verify that. Officer Chun, make the call. He turned back to Brett. Any idea who the accomplice might be? The note mentions we. Brett had been turning that question over in his mind since he'd read the note. Who would Cassie conspire with? An affair seemed obvious, but with whom? He'd been so absorbed in his work, so trusting. Had there been signs he'd missed? I don't know, Brett admitted. But I intend to find out. Let us handle this, Mr. Cunningham. You've stumbled onto something serious. If your wife is planning what it looks like she's planning, confronting her could be dangerous. The crime scene tech called out from the closet. Detective, you need to see this. Behind a row of Cassie's designer shoes, the tech had found a false panel in the wall. Inside was a laptop, not one Brett recognized, and a stack of documents. Vasquez pulled on gloves and carefully removed the items. The laptop was password protected, but the documents told their own story. Bank statements for accounts Brett had never seen. Emails printed out between Cassie and someone named RL discussing the project and removing obstacles. Flight manifests. Hotel reservations for 2 people. But it was the insurance document that made everything crystal clear. A $5 million life insurance policy on Brett Cunningham, taken out 18 months ago, with Cassandra Cunningham as the sole beneficiary. Brett had never signed any such policy, yet there was his signature, perfect in every detail. Forgery, Vasquez muttered. She's been planning this for over a year. Brett's mind was a whirlwind. A year and a half. While he'd been working late, celebrating their anniversary, making love to his wife, she'd been plotting his death. The betrayal was a physical pain in his chest. Officer Chin returned. Detective, Cassie Cunningham's phone is pinging from Miami, as stated. But here's the interesting part. She's booked into the Fontainebleau, but she's registered under her maiden name, Mercado. And there's a second room booked under the name Richard Lynn, same hotel, same floor. Richard Lynn, Brett repeated, the name clicking into place. Rich Lynn. He works for one of our competitors, Sentinel Security Solutions. I've met him at industry events. Cocky bastard, always bragging about his sales numbers. Brett's fists clenched. He tried to recruit me last year. Offered me a partnership if I'd bring my client list with me. I turned him down. Sounds like motive, Vasquez said. If he couldn't get your business one way, maybe he decided to take another approach. Romance your wife. Get access to your life, your money. Question is, who approached whom? The crime scene tech was examining the laptop with specialized equipment. Got into the hard drive. Looks like encrypted files, but I can see some metadata. Email exchanges going back 2 years between CM and RL. There's also what looks like drafts of wills, legal documents, travel plans to the Cayman Islands. 2 years. Longer than Brett had suspected. A cold fury began replacing the shock. This wasn't a crime of passion or a sudden decision. This was calculated, methodical. They'd studied him like a target, learned his patterns, forged his signature, and planned to murder him and disappear with his money. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated him. Brett had built a fortune by anticipating threats, by thinking 3 steps ahead of hackers and corporate spies. He'd created systems to protect against deception. And while he'd failed to see the deception in his own home, now that his eyes were open, his mind was already working. "Detective Vasquez," Brett said, his voice steady now, controlled. "What happens next?" "We collect this evidence, build a case. We'll coordinate with Miami PD to pick up your wife and Mr. Lin for questioning. With what we have here, we can make arrests for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, forgery. They're looking at serious prison time." "How long before they're arrested?" "Couple of days. We need warrants, proper procedures." "What?" Brett stood, his mind racing through possibilities. "Because Cassie doesn't know we found this. As far as she knows, she's still in control of the situation. If we arrest her now, we get her and Lin, but we might not get everything. There could be others involved, contingency plans we don't know about." Vasquez's eyes narrowed. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we let them think they've won. Let them continue with their plan, but on our terms. Set a trap. You get irrefutable evidence of attempted murder, caught in the act. I get justice, real justice, and we make sure everyone involved pays." "Mr. Cunningham, that's extremely dangerous. You'd be putting yourself at risk." "I've been at risk for 2 years without knowing it." Brett's jaw tightened. "At least now I can prepare. And I have advantages they don't know about. My entire career is based on surveillance, on creating digital trails. If we do this right, we can catch them red-handed and make sure they never hurt anyone else." Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, weighing the options. Finally, he said, "This isn't officially sanctioned. But if you're willing to wear a wire, if you agree to follow strict protocols and keep me informed of every step, we might be able to build an even stronger case." Brett extended his hand. "Then let's give them enough rope to hang themselves." As they shook hands, Brett felt something shift inside him. The shock and betrayal were still there, but they were fuel now. Fuel for the careful, calculated response that would ensure Cassie and Rich Lin paid for every moment of their deception. He'd spent his life protecting people from digital threats. Now it was time to protect himself from a very real one. And in doing so, he'd show his wife and her accomplice exactly what happened when you underestimated Brett Cunningham. Chapter 3: The Past Revealed. Later that night, Brett sat in his living room with a glass of scotch he wasn't drinking, while Vasquez's team finished processing the crime scene. His phone buzzed with another text from Cassie. "Dinner was amazing. Wish you were here. Love you." The casualness of her lie was staggering. She was probably with Rich Lin right now, celebrating their perfect plan, counting the days until Brett was dead and the insurance money cleared. Lin Zuniga arrived at his request, her face pale with shock when he'd called her with a vague explanation about a situation. She was more than his assistant. They'd worked together for 6 years, and he trusted her completely. "Brett, what the hell is going on?" Lin asked, settling into the chair across from him. "You sounded terrible on the phone." He told her everything. The box, the photos, the poison, the conspiracy. Lin's expression morphed from disbelief to horror to rage. "That absolute psychopath," Lin hissed. "I never liked her, you know. Always thought she was too perfect, too polished. But this..." She shook her head. "How are you even functioning right now?" "I'm not sure I am," Brett admitted. "But Vasquez and I have a plan. We're going to catch them in the act. And you need me to help. I need someone I trust. Someone who knows my schedule, my business. Someone who can help me appear normal while we set this trap." Lin leaned forward. "Tell me what you need." Over the next 2 hours, they planned. Brett would continue his routine as if nothing had changed. He'd respond to Cassie's texts, welcome her home from Miami, play the unsuspecting husband. Meanwhile, Vasquez's team would monitor her movements, track Rich Lin, and build their case in the background. But Brett had other plans too. Plans the detective didn't need to know about yet. "Lin, I need you to dig into Rich Lin's background. Everything. I want to know who he is, where he came from, any skeletons in his closet. Use whatever resources we have, call in favors, but keep it quiet. Consider it done." "What else?" "Cassie's past. We met 7 years ago, but I realize now I don't actually know much about her life before that. She said her parents died when she was young, that she was raised by an aunt in California. But what if that's all lies too? Lynn nodded, making notes on her phone. I'll start tonight. Brett, I have to ask, what are you really planning here? Brett met her eyes. Justice. But my kind of justice. The kind that ensures they regret every moment of this. After Lynn left, Brett retreated to his study, a room Cassie rarely entered, filled with his computers, monitors, and security equipment. If she wanted to play games with surveillance, she'd pick the wrong target. He began with Cassie's digital footprint. Despite being married to a cybersecurity expert, she'd been sloppy in some ways. Her laptop, the one they'd found, was now in police custody, but Brett had access to their shared cloud accounts, her email backups, her social media. He started unraveling the threads. The Cassie Mercado he'd married had worked for Pearson Pharmaceuticals. Or had she? Brett pulled up employment records, tax documents, professional licenses. Everything checked out on the surface, but when he dug deeper, inconsistencies emerged. Gaps in her employment history. Addresses that didn't match. A professional network that seemed oddly thin for someone supposedly in pharma sales for over a decade. Then he found it. A news article from 9 years ago, from Las Vegas. California woman arrested in casino fraud scheme. The photo showed a younger Cassie, or rather, Catherine Mercer, being led away in handcuffs. The article detailed how she and an accomplice had scammed wealthy casino patrons, seducing them, drugging them, and draining their accounts. The accomplice's name, Richard Lynn. Brett's blood ran cold. They'd done this before. Not murder, perhaps, but a similar con. Target wealthy men, gain their trust, take their money. The charges had been dropped due to insufficient evidence. The victims too embarrassed to testify, the evidence circumstantial. So they'd evolved. Marriage was a longer con, but it legitimized everything. And when the marriage ran its course, or when they got greedy, the husband conveniently died, and the grieving widow collected the insurance money. How many times had they done this? Was Brett just the latest in a series of victims? He kept digging, cross-referencing names, dates, locations. Over the next 3 hours, he found 3 more potential victims. Men who'd married women matching Cassie's description, men who died in accidents or natural causes within a few years of marriage. In each case, the widow had vanished shortly after collecting life insurance, and the trail went cold. One victim, a real estate developer in Phoenix, had a brother who'd posted desperate pleas on social media, claiming his brother's wife had murdered him. But without evidence, the cases remained closed. Tragic accidents. A heart attack. A fatal fall. Brett compiled everything into a secure file. This wasn't just about saving himself anymore. This was about stopping a pattern of predators, about justice for the men who'd come before him. His phone buzzed. Vasquez. Cunningham, we've got movement. Your wife just booked a flight home, arriving tomorrow afternoon. And get this, Rich Lynn booked the same flight, different name. They're getting sloppy, or they're confident. Either way, it means they're moving forward with whatever timeline they've set. Good, Brett said. Let them come. I'll be ready. Remember, you wear the wire, you follow protocols. No heroics. Understood, detective. No heroics. But as Brett ended the call and stared at the evidence on his screens, he knew his definition of justice had evolved beyond simple arrests and trials. Cassie and Rich had destroyed lives, left families in ruins, and walked away rich and free every time. Not this time. Brett Cunningham had built his fortune protecting people from unseen threats. Now he'd become the threat they never saw coming. And by the time his trap closed around them, they'd understand the price of their arrogance. The prey had become the predator, and the hunt was about to begin. Chapter 4, The Homecoming. Brett stood at the airport arrivals terminal, holding a bouquet of Cassie's favorite flowers, white roses, and wearing the carefully crafted expression of a devoted husband. The wire taped to his chest was nearly invisible, and the tiny camera in his watch captured everything. 20 feet away, Detective Vasquez sat in an unmarked car, monitoring the feed. 30 feet beyond that, 2 more undercover officers kept watch. They were taking no chances. The arrivals board flashed, landed. Brett's pulse quickened. He'd spent the morning running through scenarios with Vasquez, preparing for every possibility. Play it natural. Show no suspicion. Let her feel safe, in control. The trap only worked if the prey walked into it willingly. Passengers began streaming through the doors. Businessmen in suits, families with screaming children, college students with oversized backpacks. Then he saw her. Cassie emerged pulling a sleek carry-on, dressed in a tailored blazer and designer jeans, her dark hair perfect, her smile radiant as she spotted him. She looked like a woman returning from a successful business trip to greet her loving husband. She looked nothing like a murderer. Brett. She rushed forward, dropping her bag to embrace him. Her kiss was warm, familiar, and it took everything in Brett's power not to recoil. I missed you so much. Missed you too, he managed, handing her the roses. How was Miami? Exhausting but productive. The presentation went perfectly. I think we're going to land the contract with Meridian Health. She linked her arm through his as they walked toward the parking garage. How was your week? Did you manage without me? Barely, Brett said, the lie smooth on his tongue. Though I did hire that cleaning service. Wanted to surprise you with a spotless house. He felt her stiffen, just fractionally, before she recovered. Oh, how thoughtful. I hope they did a good job. Actually, the woman seemed a bit shaken up when she left. Said she found something that startled her in the bedroom closet, an old photo album that fell on her head. I think we scared the poor woman with our family history. Cassie laughed, but it sounded forced. Oh dear. Well, I should send her a tip, an apology. Did everything else go smoothly? Perfect. The house looks great. I thought we could have a quiet dinner tonight, just the two of us. I feel like we haven't really connected in a while. That sounds wonderful. Her grip on his arm tightened. You know I love you, right? These past few years, building our careers, sometimes I think we forget what's important. Brett opened the car door for her, watching as she settled into the passenger seat. Through his watch camera, he captured her face, the calculated sweetness, the perfect performance of a loving wife. I know exactly what's important, Brett said, his double meaning lost on her. And I'm not going to lose it. The drive home was filled with Cassie's chatter about the conference, carefully constructed lies about presentations and networking events. Brett played his part, asking questions, feigning interest, all while his mind worked on another level. Vasquez's team had searched their home top to bottom while Cassie was away. They'd placed additional cameras, audio equipment, and trackers. Every room was now monitored. Every word would be recorded. When Cassie and Rich made their move, there would be irrefutable evidence. But Brett had also made his own preparations, ones the detective didn't know about. In his study, behind a false panel similar to the one Cassie had used, Brett had compiled his own evidence. Not just of Cassie and Rich's planned murder, but of their entire criminal history. The previous victims, the pattern of fraud and death, the trail of destruction they'd left behind. When this was over, Brett would make sure they paid for everything. Not just attempted murder, but every life they destroyed. As they pulled into the driveway, Brett noticed a car parked down the street. Expensive, dark sedan, tinted windows. It pulled away as they arrived. Through the wire, he murmured, black sedan, heading north on Oakdale. Might be nothing. Vasquez's voice crackled in the nearly invisible earpiece. We saw it. Running plates now. Could be Lynn doing reconnaissance. Inside the house, Cassie did a convincing show of admiring the cleaning job. Wow, they really did a thorough job. Everything looks perfect. Brett watched her carefully. She moved through the house like normal, but her eyes were sharp, searching, looking for signs that the box had been discovered. When she made her way to the master bedroom, Brett followed. Cassie opened the closet door, glancing up at the top shelf. The box was gone, in police custody, but they'd replaced it with a similar one, filled with innocent items. Winter scarves, old photo albums, exactly what should have been there all along. She reached up, pulled the box down, opened it. Her face remained neutral, but Brett saw the momentary flash of panic in her eyes before she controlled it. Looking for something? Brett asked casually. Oh, just checking on some old photos I stored up there. I thought I might have left my grandmother's necklace in one of these boxes. She smiled, closing it and returning it to the shelf. Must be in my jewelry box. I'm getting forgetful. Well, the mind does play tricks when we're stressed. Maybe we both need a vacation. Somewhere tropical, just the two of us. Disconnect from work for a while. That sounds amazing. Maybe after the Meridian deal closes. She moved closer, placing her hands on his chest. Brett, I really do want us to reconnect. I know I've been distant. I want to fix that. So do I. Brett said, and meant it in a way she couldn't possibly understand. He wanted to fix everything by ensuring she never hurt anyone again. His phone buzzed. A text from Lynn. Found something. RL's financial records. Call me. Work? Cassie asked, her voice tight. Just Lynn with a quick question about tomorrow's meeting. I should call her back. Why don't you relax, take a bath? I'll order dinner from that Italian place you love. Perfect. She kissed his cheek. You really are wonderful, you know that. Brett waited until she'd retreated to the bathroom before stepping into his study and calling Lynn. What did you find? Rich Lynn is broke, Lynn said. Completely leveraged. He took out massive loans against his business, and Sentinel Security is failing. He's got creditors circling, and he's maybe 2 months from bankruptcy. But here's the interesting part. He recently took out a $2 million loan from a private lender, using future assets as collateral. Future assets, Brett repeated. As in the life insurance payout. Exactly. He's so confident this plan will work, he's already spent the money. If you don't die, if they don't get that payout, he's completely destroyed. A plan began forming in Brett's mind. Lynn, I need you to do something for me. It's going to sound crazy, but trust me. At this point, nothing sounds crazy. What do you need? I need you to leak a rumor. Through industry channels, carefully, so it seems like legitimate gossip. Say that Cunningham Solutions is going under, that I've made bad investments, that I'm facing a major lawsuit, that the company is about to collapse. Make it believable but devastating. There was silence on the other end. Then Lynn said, You want them to think you're worth more dead than alive, but only if they act fast before the assets disappear. Exactly. We accelerate their timeline, make them desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Brett, that's brilliant. And completely terrifying. When do you want this rumor to drop? Tomorrow. Let it spread through the industry like wildfire. I want Cassie and Rich panicking by evening. Consider it done. But Brett, be careful. If they panic, they might accelerate the murder attempt too. That's what I'm counting on. The sooner they move, the sooner this ends. After hanging up, Brett stood at his study window, looking out at the manicured lawn, the quiet street, the life he'd built. A life that had been built on a foundation of lies, with a woman who'd planned to kill him from the beginning. But Brett Cunningham hadn't built an empire by being passive. He'd succeeded by being smarter, faster, and more ruthless than his competition. And now, facing the ultimate betrayal, those same skills would ensure his survival and exact the revenge he deserved. Cassie and Rich thought they were hunting him. They had no idea they'd walked into the sights of someone far more dangerous than they'd ever imagined. The game was on, and Brett was about to show them exactly what happened when you underestimated your prey. Chapter 5. The Pressure Builds. The rumor spread through Chicago's business community like wildfire. By noon the next day, Brett's phone was exploding with calls from concerned colleagues, investors, and competitors pretending to offer sympathy while fishing for details. Lynn had done her job perfectly. The Whisper network buzzed with speculation. Cunningham Solutions was facing a massive lawsuit from a client whose data had been breached. Brett Cunningham had made disastrous investments in cryptocurrency. The company was hemorrhaging money, potentially heading for bankruptcy. Assets would be frozen within weeks. None of it was true, but the financial world thrived on rumors. And Brett had enough legitimate success that a spectacular fall seemed almost inevitable to the vultures who watched from the sidelines. He watched Cassie take a call in the next room, her voice low and urgent. Through the audio surveillance, he heard every word. No, I'm telling you, it's just rumors. What do you mean you heard it from 3 sources? Rich, calm down. Yes, I understand the timeline. We can't move it up that much. It'll look suspicious. Fine, we'll meet tonight to discuss. She ended the call, her hands shaking. Brett entered the room casually, his expression concerned. Everything okay? You look upset. Cassie's face transformed, worry shifting to a sympathetic smile. Oh, it's nothing. Just office drama. But Brett, honey, I'm hearing some concerning things about Cunningham Solutions. People are saying there's financial trouble. Is everything all right? Brett let his shoulders sag, played the part of a man trying to hide his stress. It's complicated. There's a potential lawsuit from the Morrison account. One of their executives is claiming we failed to prevent a breach, even though they ignored our security recommendations. It's baseless, but the legal fees alone could be devastating. And some investments I made last year aren't panning out the way I'd hoped. He watched her face carefully. She was trying to look sympathetic, but her eyes gleamed with something else. Calculation. Opportunity. How bad is it? She asked. Bad enough that we might need to liquidate some assets. The house, maybe. Scale back significantly. I'm meeting with lawyers and accountants all week. He rubbed his face, a picture of exhaustion. I'm sorry, Cassie. I know this affects you too. Our lifestyle, everything we've built. No, don't apologize. We're a team, remember? We'll figure this out together. She hugged him, and through the wire, Brett heard Vasquez's quiet commentary. She's practically salivating. This is working. I might need to increase my life insurance, Brett continued, delivering the line he and Vasquez had scripted. Just in case something happens to me, I want to make sure you're protected. I'm meeting with the insurance agent this afternoon to double the policy. Cassie pulled back, her eyes wide. Brett, don't talk like that. Nothing's going to happen to you. I know. But these days, with the stress, my heart's been acting up. Probably nothing, but I want to be responsible. Make sure you're taken care of, no matter what. He could practically see the wheels turning in her head. If his business was failing, if his assets were about to be frozen in litigation, but his life insurance was about to double, she had to act fast. Dead, he'd be worth more than alive, but only if they moved before everything collapsed. Cassie kissed his forehead. You're too good to me. But listen, maybe tonight's not the best time for us to have that romantic dinner. You're stressed, you have meetings. How about I go out with some girlfriends? Give you space to think. We can reconnect this weekend. You sure? I feel like I've been neglecting you. Absolutely. You focus on business. I'll be fine. Her smile was perfect, practiced. I love you. I love you too, Brett said, the words ashes in his mouth. After she left, Brett checked his watch. Through the hidden cameras, he'd seen Cassie texting furiously before she'd come to talk to him. The message to Rich, tonight. We have to move tonight. Meet me at the usual place, 7 p.m. The usual place turned out to be a bar called the Rusty Nail in a neighborhood 40 minutes away, somewhere they thought they'd never be seen by anyone from their circles. Vasquez's team was already setting up surveillance. Brett spent the afternoon in carefully orchestrated meetings with his lawyer and accountant. Real meetings, but with scripted conversations that would be reported back through the gossip network, confirming the rumors of financial disaster. At 6:30, Lynn arrived at his home office with a tablet. They're on the move. Cassie left the house 20 minutes ago, heading to the Rusty Nail. Rich Lynn's already there, back booth. Vasquez has visual. Brett pulled up the surveillance feed on his computer. The video was grainy but clear enough. Rich Lynn sat in a corner booth, his handsome face twisted with stress. He was 36, fit, with the kind of polished charm that would appeal to wealthy targets. But right now, he looked like a man whose carefully constructed world was crumbling. Cassie arrived, sliding into the booth across from him. Even without audio, they were too far from the surveillance equipment. Brett could read the tension in their body language. Then the audio kicked in. One of Vasquez's undercover officers, posing as a waitress, had placed a listening device on their table. Can't believe this is happening, Rich was saying. $2 million, Cassie. I borrowed $2 million against the payout. If he doesn't die, if we don't get that money, I'm destroyed. They'll take everything. I know, but we can't rush this. If we move too fast, it'll look suspicious. Suspicious? He's already going bankrupt. His assets will be frozen. The life insurance is the only thing worth anything, and you heard him. He's doubling it today. But insurance companies investigate when people die right after increasing their policies. We're running out of time. Then we stick to the plan, Cassie hissed. Tomorrow night. I'll put the compound in his scotch. He has one glass every evening around 9, like clockwork. He'll have a heart attack in his sleep. Natural causes. Stress from the business failure. We wait the appropriate time, collect the insurance, and disappear. Brett's hands clenched into fists. Tomorrow night. They were going to kill him tomorrow night. What if it goes wrong? Rich asked. What if someone suspects? No one will suspect. We've been over this 100 times. The compound is untraceable. His doctor will confirm he's been under stress. There's a history of heart disease in his family. It's perfect. Cassie's voice turned cold. Just like Phoenix was perfect. And Austin. And Portland. Phoenix was messy. That brother was suspicious. But he couldn't prove anything, could he? They never can. And this time is even cleaner. Brett trusts me completely. The fool actually thinks I love him. Brett's jaw clenched so hard it ached. Through the earpiece, he heard Vasquez. "We've got enough. We can arrest them right now. Attempted conspiracy to commit murder." "No," Brett murmured. "Let them try. I want them caught in the act, with the compound in my drink, their intentions undeniable. I want every charge to stick, no room for reasonable doubt. It's risky. It's necessary. They've done this before. You heard her. Phoenix, Austin, Portland. Other men. Other lives. I want every case reopened, every victim to get justice. That only happens if we have absolute proof." On the screen, Cassie and Rich were standing, preparing to leave. Cassie touched Rich's face gently, a gesture of intimacy that made Brett's stomach turn. "Tomorrow night, this all ends. We'll be rich, free, and together. Just like we planned." "Just like we planned," Rich echoed, kissing her. Brett closed the feed. He'd seen enough. Lynn touched his shoulder gently. "Are you okay?" "No," Brett said honestly. "But I will be. After tomorrow night, I'll finally be free of her. And she'll pay for everything she's done." He pulled up his files on the previous victims. 3 men, all dead within years of marrying women matching Cassie's description. Men who'd trusted, loved, and been murdered for their money. Men whose families still grieved, still questioned, still sought answers. Tomorrow night, Brett would give them those answers. And he'd ensure that Cassie Mercado, or Catherine Mercer, or whatever her real name was, and Richard Lynn never hurt anyone again. The trap was set. The prey was moving into position. And when it closed, the justice would be swift, complete, and utterly devastating. Brett Cunningham was about to remind the world why he'd built an empire from nothing. Because he was smarter, more determined, and infinitely more dangerous than anyone who'd ever tried to destroy him. Chapter 6. The Final Preparations. Brett spent the day of reckoning in his office, finalizing what Vasquez thought was just a surveillance operation, but what Brett knew was something far more comprehensive. The detective had his team in place, ready to intervene the moment Cassie made her move. But Brett had his own endgame planned. At 3 p.m., Lynn entered with a folder. "The background checks you requested on the previous victims. You were right. All 3 cases share the same pattern. Each man died within 2 years of marriage. Each death ruled natural or accidental. Each had recently increased their life insurance. And in each case, the widow disappeared within months of collecting the payout." Brett flipped through the documents. James Patterson in Phoenix fell from a hiking trail, ruled accidental. Marcus Chun in Austin, heart attack at 42, no prior health issues. David Foster in Portland, drowning during a solo fishing trip. All wealthy, all dead, all with grieving families who'd suspected foul play but couldn't prove it. "The families deserve to know the truth," Brett said. "They deserve closure. They'll get it. Once Cassie and Rich are arrested, these cases will be reopened. Federal charges, given the interstate nature of the crimes. They're looking at life in prison, if they're convicted. But juries can be unpredictable, and good lawyers can create reasonable doubt." Brett's expression hardened. "I need to make sure the evidence is airtight. Not just for attempted murder, but for everything." Lynn studied him carefully. "Brett, what are you really planning? Because I've known you long enough to recognize when you're operating on multiple levels." Brett was quiet for a moment, then pulled out a second laptop, one Lynn had never seen before. "What I'm planning is to be thorough. Cassie and Rich have spent years perfecting their con, but they've made one critical mistake." "What's that?" "They targeted someone who understands digital forensics better than anyone. Every email they've ever sent, every financial transaction, every digital footprint. I've been tracing it all. When the police arrest them, they'll have evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. But I'm going to give the FBI evidence of a criminal enterprise spanning years, multiple states, multiple victims. I'm going to connect every dot, link every crime, and ensure they never see daylight again." He pulled up a complex web of connections on the screen, financial records, travel history, digital communications, all linking Cassie and Rich to the previous deaths. "I've spent the last 3 days building a case that's absolutely irrefutable. No reasonable doubt. No chance of acquittal. And I've also documented everything to their financial backers, their families, everyone who might try to help them. By the time I'm done, they'll be completely isolated." Lynn shook her head in admiration. "You're not just catching them. You're destroying them. They destroyed 3 innocent men and tried to destroy me. They deserve nothing less." His phone buzzed. Vasquez, subject purchase bottle of scotch, your brand. Heading home now. We're in position. Brett's pulse quickened. This was it. The final act. He drove home at 5, just like any normal evening. The house looked peaceful, welcoming. Cassie's car was in the driveway. Through the windows, he could see movement. His wife, preparing for his murder as casually as she might prepare dinner. Inside, Cassie greeted him with a kiss. You look exhausted. Rough day. The worst. The lawyers basically confirmed that the lawsuit is going forward. I'm looking at months of litigation, maybe years. The stress is killing me. Poor baby, she cooed, guiding him to the couch. How about you relax? I'll make us some dinner, and afterward, you can have your scotch, unwind a bit. Brett nodded, playing his part. Every word was being recorded. Every movement captured on hidden cameras. Vasquez's team was positioned around the house, ready to intervene the moment Cassie added the compound to his drink. He changed into comfortable clothes, returned downstairs. Cassie was in the kitchen, humming while she prepared dinner. To any outside observer, they looked like a normal couple on a normal evening. But Brett could see the tension in her shoulders, the careful deliberation in her movements. She was preparing to murder him, and the anticipation was written in every gesture. Dinner was salmon and asparagus, his favorite. They ate at the dining room table, Cassie maintaining cheerful conversation about her day, about plans for the weekend, about a vacation they should take once his legal troubles were resolved. Vacation, as if she planned to be around for it. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Cassie settled on the couch with a glass of wine while Brett retrieved the new bottle of scotch from the bar, the one she'd purchased specifically for tonight, he now realized. Easier to doctor a fresh bottle. Here, let me pour that for you, Cassie said, standing. You sit down, relax. This was it. The moment she'd make her move. Brett handed her the bottle and settled into his favorite chair, watching through the reflection in the window. Cassie moved to the bar, her back to him. Her hand slipped into her pocket, withdrawing something small. The vial. Through the wire, Brett murmured, she's adding it now. Vasquez's response crackled in his earpiece. We see it. The moment you confirm the compound is in the glass, we move. Cassie returned with the glass, her smile perfect. Here you go. You've earned this. Brett took the glass, studying the amber liquid. You're too good to me. You deserve it, she said, settling back on the couch, her eyes fixed on him with predatory intensity. Brett raised the glass to his lips, then paused. Actually, you know what? Let me make a toast first. To us, to our marriage, to 7 years together. Cassie's smile faltered slightly. Brett, you don't need to. I want to. He stood, walking to the bar to retrieve the bottle and another glass. This seems like a moment worth commemorating. Here, have some scotch with me. It's a special evening, after all. Panic flashed across Cassie's face. I don't like scotch, you know that. I have my wine. Indulge me. Just this once. We can drink together, to whatever comes next. He poured a second glass from the same bottle, not the one he was holding, and offered it to her. Cassie stared at it like it was a live snake. I really don't want. What's wrong, Cassie? Brett's voice was cold now, the pretense dropping. Afraid of what might be in it. Her face went white. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the compound you just added to my drink. The same untraceable poison you used on James Patterson in Phoenix, Marcus Chin in Austin, and David Foster in Portland. I'm talking about the fact that you and Rich Lynn have been planning to murder me for insurance money, just like you've done to 3 other men. Cassie stood abruptly, the wine glass falling from her hand and shattering on the floor. You're insane. The stress has made you paranoid. Really? Then drink the scotch. Prove me wrong. I'm not drinking it. Why not? It's perfectly safe, isn't it? Brett's smile was razor sharp. Unless, of course, you know exactly what you put in my glass. Unless you know that drinking it would kill you. The front door burst open. Vasquez and his team flooded in, weapons drawn. Cassie Cunningham, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder. Cassie bolted for the back door, but officers were already there, blocking her escape. She spun, wild-eyed, looking for any way out. Finding none, she turned on Brett with pure venom. You son of a bitch. You knew. How long have you known? Since the cleaning lady found your little box of secrets. Since I realized the woman I married was actually Catherine Mercer, professional con artist and murderer. Since I understood that everything about our marriage was a lie. You have no proof, she spat. Good luck proving any of this. Brett pulled out his phone, played the audio from her conversation with Rich at the Rusty Nail. Her own voice filled the room. Tomorrow night. I'll put the compound in his scotch. Just like Phoenix was perfect. And Austin. And Portland. Cassie's face crumbled. Then, suddenly, she lunged at Brett, fingers clawed, screaming. Officers tackled her before she reached him, forcing her to the ground. You think you've won? She shrieked as they cuffed her. You think this is over? Rich will find you. He'll finish what we started. You're a dead man. Brett Cunningham. Brett crouched down, meeting her eyes with arctic calm. Rich Lynn was arrested 20 minutes ago. Even as you were poisoning my drink, FBI agents were raiding his office and home. They've seized all his financial records, his communications with you, evidence linking him to all 3 previous murders. He's going to prison for the rest of his life. And so are you. But here's the thing, Cassie. Brett continued, his voice deadly quiet. I didn't just gather enough evidence to convict you. I documented everything. Every crime, every victim, every lie. The families of the men you killed? They're being contacted tonight. They'll finally have closure, finally have justice. And your name, Catherine Mercer, will be synonymous with everything vile and predatory in this world. He stood, watching as officers dragged her toward the door. You wanted my money, my life, my death. Instead, you get to spend the rest of your existence in a cage, knowing you failed. Knowing that the man you tried to destroy was smarter, stronger, and better than you in every way. That's your legacy now. As they pulled her out of the house, Cassie's screams echoed into the night. Vasquez approached Brett, respect clear in his eyes. That was one hell of a performance, Cunningham. Though I have to say, for a minute there, I thought you were actually going to drink it. Not a chance, Brett said, setting down the untouched glass. But I needed her confession on record, needed her to admit everything without any coercion. Now there's no defense, no way out. The FBI wants to talk to you tomorrow about the other cases. With your evidence, they can reopen all 3 investigations, potentially find more victims we don't even know about. Brett nodded, exhaustion finally setting in. I'll give them everything I have. Those families deserve the truth. After the police cleared out, Lynn arrived, finding Brett standing in his study, staring at the evidence boards he'd compiled. It's over, she said softly. It's over, Brett echoed. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival, like waking from a nightmare to find the real world scarred and changed. What happens now? Lynn asked. Brett turned to her, his expression hardening with resolve. Now? Now I make sure they never get out. Now I testify at their trials, help the FBI with every case, ensure that every victim gets justice. And then, he took a deep breath. Then I rebuild. I take everything they tried to destroy, my life, my reputation, my trust, and I build something stronger. Something they can never touch. Lynn smiled. That's the Brett Cunningham I know. The one who never gives up, never backs down. They tried to make me a victim, Brett said quietly. Instead, they created their own worst enemy. And I'm going to make sure they regret that every single day for the rest of their miserable lives. The hunt was over. Justice was coming. And Brett Cunningham was just getting started. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The media firestorm began within hours. By morning, every news outlet in Chicago was running the story. Socialite wife arrested in murder-for-hire plot. Con artist cross-country killing spree exposed. Tech CEO outsmarts would-be assassins. Brett's phone never stopped ringing. Reporters camped outside his house. But he'd gone to ground, staying at a hotel under an assumed name while the police secured his home and Lynn managed the media circus. 3 days after Cassie's arrest, Brett sat in an FBI conference room with Special Agent Marco Chase and a team of federal investigators. On the table between them lay years of evidence, financial records, surveillance photos, toxicology reports, digital forensics Brett had compiled. Mr. Cunningham, Chase said, spreading out crime scene photos from the 3 previous cases. What you've given us is enough to reopen every one of these investigations and potentially link your wife and Richard Lynn to premeditated murder in multiple jurisdictions. This is unprecedented. Brett studied the photos of James Patterson, Marcus Chun, and David Foster. 3 men he'd never met, but whose families he'd now spoken to, grieving relatives who'd spent years believing their suspicions but lacking proof. These men deserve justice. Their families deserve closure. They'll get both. Lin is cooperating, trying to save his own skin by blaming everything on your wife. He's given us details about the Phoenix case, admitted to helping stage the hiking accident, claims Cassie seduced Patterson, married him, then grew impatient when he didn't increase his life insurance fast enough. Let me guess, Brett said coldly. Rich wants a plea deal. His lawyers are pushing for it. But given the evidence you've provided, we don't need his cooperation. We can prove all 3 murders without him. Chase leaned forward. There's something else. We've been digging into Catherine Mercer's background. That's not her real name either. Brett's eyes narrowed. Who is she? Chase slid a file across the table. Inside was a photo of a young woman, maybe 19, with Cassie's features, but different hair, different style. Her real name is Catherine Volkova. She's Russian by birth, came to the U.S. at 17 with falsified documents. Before that, she was part of an organized crime operation in Moscow, honeypot schemes targeting wealthy businessmen. The group was broken up by Russian authorities, but several members fled to the U.S. She's done this before, Brett said, pieces clicking into place. The con, the marriages, the murders, this has been her life. For at least 12 years that we can document. Phoenix was her first kill in the U.S., but we're coordinating with Interpol. There may be victims in Russia, possibly other countries. Mr. Cunningham, your wife isn't just a con artist. She's a professional predator with an international criminal history. Brett sat back, absorbing this. The woman he'd married, the woman he'd trusted, was even more monstrous than he'd imagined. And Rich Lin, small-time con artist until he met Volkova. They connected in Las Vegas 9 years ago, ran that casino scheme together. She taught him the art of the long con. They've been partners ever since, romantic and criminal. Chase closed the file. They're both looking at multiple life sentences. But the prosecution wants your testimony to seal the case. Will you testify? Absolutely. Brett's voice was steel. I'll testify at every trial, in every jurisdiction. I'll make sure they never see freedom again. The next week was a blur of legal proceedings. Rich Lin, desperate to avoid multiple life sentences, did try to cooperate, but his testimony was inconsistent, clearly calculated to minimize his role. His lawyers painted him as a victim of Cassie's manipulation, a hapless accomplice. Brett wasn't having it. On the day of Rich's bail hearing, Brett arrived at the courthouse with Lin and a new ally, Marcus Chin's brother, Philip Griffin. Philip had flown in from Austin, carrying with him years of grief and anger over his brother's death. Thank you for doing this, Philip said as they climbed the courthouse steps. For 3 years, I knew something was wrong. The police said it was just a heart attack, but Marcus was healthy. He ran marathons. It didn't make sense. It makes sense now, Brett replied. And they're going to pay for it. Inside the courtroom, Rich Lin sat at the defense table, his expensive suit unable to hide the hollowness in his eyes. When he saw Brett, something flickered across his face: fear, hatred, resignation. The prosecution called Brett to the stand for a victim impact statement. He looked directly at Rich as he spoke. Richard Lin didn't just attempt to murder me. He helped plan and execute the murders of 3 other innocent men. He systematically destroyed families, left children without fathers, wives without husbands, parents without sons. He did this for money, without remorse, and when he was caught, he tried to blame everyone but himself. Brett's voice grew harder. But here's what Rich didn't count on. He targeted the wrong person. He underestimated me, assumed I'd be another easy mark. Instead, I documented every crime, traced every connection, and handed the FBI a case so airtight that his cooperation is meaningless. He has nothing to bargain with because I've already given the prosecution everything they need. He leaned forward. Rich, you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. Not because you got caught, but because you were stupid enough to think you were smarter than me. You weren't. You never were. The judge denied bail. Rich was remanded into custody pending trial, his fate effectively sealed. Cassie, or Catherine, was another matter. She refused to cooperate, refused to show remorse. At her arraignment, she maintained her innocence despite overwhelming evidence. But Brett had one more card to play. Through his cybersecurity contacts, he'd acquired something special: access to the dark web communications between Catherine and her associates. Financial transactions proving she'd been funneling money to offshore accounts. communications suggesting there might be even more victims than the FBI had discovered. He delivered this to the FBI with a simple message: make sure she never gets out. 2 weeks later, federal prosecutors announced they were seeking the death penalty for Katherine Volkova in the murder of James Patterson. The evidence was irrefutable: premeditation, financial motive, and the use of an exotic poison that proved sophisticated planning. Brett didn't attend that hearing. He'd said what he needed to say. Instead, he focused on the families of the victims. He met with Sarah Patterson, James's widow, in a coffee shop in Phoenix. She was 45, with tired eyes that had seen too much grief. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "For 3 years, everyone told me I was paranoid, that James had just been unlucky. But I knew. A wife knows." "You were right to trust your instincts," Brett replied. "And your family will finally have justice." "Will it bring him back?" "No, but it will ensure she never does this again. That has to count for something." He had similar conversations with Marcus Chen's family in Austin, with David Foster's elderly parents in Portland. Each meeting was emotionally exhausting, but necessary. These people had lived with uncertainty and grief, and Brett could give them answers. But the most important conversation was with Detective Vasquez, in Brett's downtown office a month after the arrests. "The trials are going to take time," Vasquez said. "Multiple jurisdictions, complex evidence. Could be a year, maybe 2 before final sentencing." "I'll be there for all of it," Brett said. "Whatever they need." Vasquez studied him carefully. "You did something remarkable, Cunningham. Most people in your situation would have just let us arrest them, taken the easy route. But you built a case that's going to close multiple murders, potentially save future lives. That takes dedication. And guts." "It takes anger," Brett corrected. "They tried to destroy me. I couldn't just let that go." "No, it's more than that. You could have settled for revenge, and believe me, arrest and conviction is revenge enough. But you went further. You made sure every victim got justice, every family got closure. That's not just about you. That's about making things right." Brett was quiet for a moment. "I built my career protecting people from threats they couldn't see. For years, I was so focused on digital dangers that I missed the real threat in my own home. I can't undo that mistake. But I can make sure what I learned, what I discovered, protects others." "You know," Vasquez said, standing to leave, "if you ever get tired of the tech world, Chicago PD could use someone with your skills. Someone who thinks 10 steps ahead." Brett smiled slightly. "I'll keep that in mind." After Vasquez left, Brett stood at his office window, looking out at the city he'd called home for 15 years. The city where he'd built his success, where he'd fallen in love, where he'd almost died. His phone buzzed. "Lynn, the board approved the new company initiative. Cunningham Solutions will now offer free cybersecurity services to domestic abuse victims and families affected by financial crime. They love it." Brett smiled. From the ashes of his destroyed marriage, something good would emerge. Services to help others, to protect people from predators like Catherine and Rich. His life had been built on a foundation of lies. But from those ruins, he was constructing something stronger, something meaningful. The hunt was over. But Brett Cunningham's mission was just beginning. Chapter 8. The Trials. 6 months later, Brett sat in a Chicago courtroom as Katherine Volkova's trial began. The prosecution had decided to try her for his attempted murder first. The evidence was most recent and most airtight. The other cases would follow if needed. Katherine, she'd legally returned to using Volkova after her arrest, sat at the defense table looking nothing like the polished socialite Brett had married. Her hair was pulled back severely, no makeup, wearing a plain gray suit. Her lawyers had clearly advised her to look sympathetic, non-threatening. It wasn't working. The jury had been selected after weeks of voir dire. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Stephen Howell, had assembled a devastating case. Howell was a prosecutor's prosecutor, mid-40s, sharp as a blade, with a conviction record that made defense attorneys nervous. "Ladies and gentlemen," Howell began his opening statement, "over the next few weeks, you're going to hear about a predator. Not the kind you see in movies. Not someone who acts on impulse or passion. No, you're going to hear about Katherine Volkova, a woman who has made a career, literally a career, out of seducing, manipulating, and murdering wealthy men for their money." He gestured to Brett in the gallery. "Brett Cunningham is alive today because of luck. A cleaning lady happened to find a box hidden in a closet. If not for that random chance, Mr. Cunningham would be dead, and the defendant would be $5 million richer and planning her next victim. The defense attorney, a slick lawyer named Leroy Ross who specialized in impossible cases, painted a different picture. The prosecution wants you to believe my client is some kind of master criminal, a femme fatale from a noir film. But what you'll actually see is evidence of a troubled woman who made poor choices, who fell under the influence of her co-defendant, Richard Lynn. Yes, there were plans she never acted on, plans she may have been coerced into. But plans are not actions. And in America, we don't convict people for thoughts. Brett watched the jury's faces. Some looked skeptical of Ross's argument. Others seemed uncertain. That's what worried him. The possibility of reasonable doubt, of a hung jury, of Catherine getting off on a technicality. But Howell was thorough. Over the next 2 weeks, he methodically built his case. Day 1. Barbara McCormick, the cleaning lady, testified about finding the box, about the surveillance photos and poison. Her testimony was emotional, genuine. The jury was riveted. Day 3. Detective Vasquez walked through the investigation, the evidence collection, the surveillance of Catherine and Rich at the Rusty Nail. The recordings of their conversation played in the courtroom. Catherine's voice coldly discussing putting the compound in his scotch, mentioning Phoenix, Austin, Portland. Day 5. The forensic analyst testified about the poison, a rare chemical compound, nearly untraceable, that induced cardiac arrest. He explained how it had to be specially acquired, how it required knowledge and premeditation. This isn't something you just stumble upon, he said. Someone sought this out specifically to kill. Day 7. Lynn Zuniga testified about Brett's discovery of Catherine's true identity, the falsified background, the pattern of marriages and deaths. The jury looked shocked as the scope of Catherine's crimes unfolded. But the prosecution's key witness was Rich Lynn. Despite his legal troubles, Rich had been offered a deal: testify truthfully against Catherine, and his death penalty would be taken off the table. He'd still face life in prison, but he'd avoid execution. Rich took the stand looking like a broken man. His expensive suits were gone, replaced by prison orange. His confidence was shattered. Mr. Lynn, Howell began, how did you meet Catherine Volkova? In Vegas, 9 years ago. At a casino. She was working a mark, some oil executive from Texas. I was running a card-counting scheme. We started talking, realized we had similar skills. Skills in defrauding people? Yes. And you became partners. Romantic partners and criminal partners. Yes. Tell the jury about James Patterson. Rich's voice was mechanical, rehearsed. Catherine met him at a business conference in Phoenix. She seduced him, learned about his money, his habits. We staged the hiking accident. I pushed him off the trail. Made it look like a fall. Catherine collected $1 million insurance payout. The courtroom was silent except for gasping from the gallery. Brett glanced back to see Sarah Patterson, James's widow, crying quietly. And Marcus Chun in Austin? Same pattern. Catherine married him, but he was cautious with money. Didn't have enough insurance. So we used the poison, an earlier, clumsier version. It worked, but it was riskier. That's when Catherine started perfecting the compound, making it untraceable. And David Foster in Portland? Drowning. We made it look like he fell from his fishing boat, drunk. He wasn't drunk. Catherine had drugged him. I held him under until he stopped moving. The coldness of Rich's confession sent chills through the courtroom. This wasn't remorse. It was mechanical recitation. A man who'd committed such horrors that they no longer affected him. And Brett Cunningham? The plan was the same. Catherine had been with him for 7 years. Longer than the others because he was worth more. We waited, planned. When we heard about his financial troubles, we knew it was time. She'd put the compound in his scotch. He'd die in his sleep. Heart attack from stress. We'd collect the insurance and disappear. Why didn't it work? The cleaning lady found our evidence. Brett was smarter than we thought. He figured it out and set a trap. Howell let that sit for a moment. Mr. Lynn, in your years with Catherine Volkova, did she ever express remorse for these killings? Never. She called them projects. Like they were business deals, not people. She enjoyed it. The planning, the manipulation, the control. She said Marks deserved it for being stupid enough to fall for her. The cross-examination was brutal. Ross tried to discredit Rich, paint him as the real mastermind trying to frame Catherine. But Rich stuck to his story, and the evidence supported every word. On day 12, Brett took the stand. Howell walked him through the marriage, the discovery, the surveillance. Brett was calm, factual, letting the evidence speak for itself. But when Howell asked him about the moment he realized his wife was trying to kill him, Brett's composure cracked slightly. "I looked at that box," Brett said quietly, "and I realized that 7 years of my life had been a lie. Every kiss, every I love you, every shared moment. All of it was part of a plan to murder me. The woman I thought I knew never existed. Catherine Volkova saw me as a mark, a paycheck, something to be eliminated when convenient. How did that make you feel? Betrayed, angry, but also determined. Determined to survive, to expose her, to make sure she never did this to anyone else." Ross's cross-examination tried to suggest Brett had fabricated evidence, that his tech expertise allowed him to create false digital trails. But Brett had anticipated this. "Every piece of evidence I collected is corroborated by independent sources," Brett said calmly. "The FBI verified it all. I didn't create anything. I just found what Catherine tried to hide. But isn't it convenient that you, a cybersecurity expert, happened to find all this evidence? That everything fell into place so perfectly?" "The only thing convenient," Brett replied, his voice hard, "is that a cleaning lady happened to find that box. If not for Barbara McCormick's random discovery, I'd be dead, and you wouldn't be sitting here trying to create reasonable doubt where none exists." The final witness was the insurance investigator who'd examined the forged policy on Brett's life. She testified that the signature was expertly forged, that Catherine had access to Brett's documents through their marriage, that the fraud was sophisticated and premeditated. After 3 weeks of testimony, both sides rested. Closing arguments were scheduled for the following Monday. That weekend, Brett met with the families of Catherine's victims. They'd all come to Chicago for the trial, wanting to see justice firsthand. "Thank you," Sarah Patterson said again, "for everything, for finding the truth, for making sure she pays." "It's not over yet," Brett cautioned. "The jury still has to deliberate. They'll convict," Philip Griffin said with certainty. No jury could hear that evidence and let her walk. Brett hoped he was right. On Monday, Howell delivered a closing argument that was masterful in its simplicity. He didn't need theatrics. The evidence spoke for itself. He simply reminded the jury of every piece of evidence, every testimony, every damning fact. "Catherine Volkova is a predator," he concluded. "She has destroyed families, ended lives, and done it all without remorse. The evidence is overwhelming, irrefutable. Your duty is clear. Find her guilty, and ensure she never hurts anyone again." Ross tried to create doubt, but his arguments rang hollow against the mountain of evidence. "Plans aren't actions," he repeated. "Thoughts aren't crimes. You must have proof beyond reasonable doubt." But the jury had that proof. Mountains of it. They deliberated for 8 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous. Guilty, on all counts. Catherine Volkova showed no emotion as the verdict was read. But Brett saw something in her eyes, a flash of pure hatred directed at him. Even in defeat, she blamed him for her downfall. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. But Brett knew what it would be. Life in prison, no possibility of parole. And with the other jurisdictions waiting to try her for the previous murders, she'd face multiple life sentences. As Brett left the courthouse, surrounded by reporters and cameras, he felt something he hadn't felt in months: closure. Catherine Volkova's reign of terror was over. And while the legal proceedings would continue, the outcome was certain. She would spend the rest of her life in a cage, paying for every life she'd destroyed. Brett had won, not just survived, but triumphed. And in doing so, he'd ensured that every one of Catherine's victims finally had justice. The nightmare was over, and Brett Cunningham was finally, truly free. Chapter 9: New Beginnings. 3 months after Catherine Volkova's conviction, Brett stood in a different courtroom, this one in Phoenix. Arizona was trying Catherine for James Patterson's murder, and Brett had been called to testify about the pattern of crimes, the connection between all the cases. Sarah Patterson sat in the front row, finally able to attend the trial that would give her husband justice. When Brett finished his testimony, she approached him outside the courtroom. "James would have liked you," she said. "He always appreciated people who stood up to bullies, who fought for what was right. Thank you for fighting for him, even though you never met him." "He deserved justice," Brett replied simply, "You all did." The Arizona trial ended with another guilty verdict. Life sentence, consecutive to the federal sentence. Catherine's life was effectively over. The Austin trial followed, then Portland. Each time, Brett testified. Each time, he watched the families of the victims find closure. Each time, Catherine received another life sentence. By the end, Catherine Volkova had been convicted of 4 counts of first-degree murder, multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. She was serving 4 life sentences plus 150 years, held in a maximum security federal prison in Colorado. She would never be free again. Rich Lynn had received similar sentences, despite his cooperation. The judge in his case had been clear. Cooperation doesn't erase the lives you've taken. You may have testified against your partner, but you were an equal participant in these horrors. You deserve to spend the rest of your life in prison. Brett had attended that sentencing too, wanting to see it through to the end. When Rich was led away in shackles, he looked at Brett one final time, his expression a mixture of defeat and resentment. Brett had felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, just a sense of completion. The chapter was closed. Now, 6 months after Catherine's first conviction, Brett stood in his newly redesigned office at Cunningham Solutions. The company had not only survived the scandal, but thrived. Clients appreciated Brett's tenacity, his intelligence, his refusal to be a victim. The company's stock had actually risen. But more importantly, Brett had launched the initiative he'd planned, the Cunningham Foundation, providing free cybersecurity and legal services to victims of domestic violence, financial fraud, and abuse. Already, they'd helped dozens of people escape dangerous situations, protected them from digital stalking, and assisted in prosecuting abusers. Lynn knocked on his office door. "You have a visitor." Says he's an old friend. Brett looked up, surprised. He hadn't had many visitors since the trials ended. Most people didn't know how to act around him. The man who'd almost been murdered by his wife. The visitor was Philip Griffin, Marcus Chin's brother from Austin. "Philip," Brett said, standing to shake his hand. "This is a surprise. What brings you to Chicago?" "I wanted to thank you in person," Philip said, "and to give you this." He handed Brett an envelope. Inside was a check, a substantial one, made out to the Cunningham Foundation. "Philip, this is too much." "It's not enough," Philip interrupted. "Brett, you gave my family closure. After 3 years of wondering, of suspecting, of being told we were paranoid, you gave us the truth. You gave us justice. This is the least I can do." Brett was touched. "Thank you. This will help a lot of people." "That's the idea." Marcus would have wanted that. He was always about helping people, protecting people. In a way, your foundation is honoring him and all of Catherine's victims. After Philip left, Brett sat alone in his office, thinking about the journey. The betrayal, the investigation, the trials. The families he'd met, the lives that had been destroyed and the justice that had been served. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mr. Cunningham, my name is Diana Foster, David's daughter. I'm 16 now. My mom said you helped catch the woman who killed my dad. I just wanted to say thank you. Because of you, I finally understand what happened, and I can move forward. You gave me my life back." Brett stared at the message, emotion welling up. This was what mattered. Not the convictions, not the revenge, but the healing he'd helped enable. The futures he'd protected. He typed back, "Thank you for reaching out, Diana. Your father would be proud of the person you're becoming. If you ever need anything, college recommendations, career advice, or just someone to talk to, the Cunningham Foundation is here for you." 3 dots appeared, then, "Thank you. That means everything." Brett set down his phone and walked to his office window, looking out at Chicago's skyline. The city looked different now, sharper, clearer. He saw it with eyes that had been opened to darkness but had found their way back to light. Lynn appeared in the doorway again. "Brett, your 3 o'clock is here. The interview with Forbes about the foundation and the new security initiatives. Right? Send them in." As the reporter entered, Brett straightened his tie and prepared to tell his story once more. Not as a victim, but as a survivor. As someone who'd faced the worst betrayal imaginable and turned it into something meaningful. The interview went well. The reporter was impressed by the foundation, by Brett's mission, by his resilience. "Mr. Cunningham," she asked as they wrapped up, "after everything you've been through, do you trust people? Can you trust again?" Brett considered this. "I trust differently now. I trust, but verify. I listen to my instincts. I don't ignore red flags or dismiss suspicions. But yes, I still trust. Because the alternative, living in fear, isolated, unable to connect, that would mean Catherine won. She'd have destroyed me without ever killing me. So she didn't win. No, Brett said firmly. She didn't. I'm still here, stronger than before. She's in prison for the rest of her life. I'd say I won decisively. After the interview, as the sun set over Chicago, Brett remained in his office, finalizing plans for the Foundation's next initiative, a scholarship program for children who'd lost parents to violent crime. His phone rang. Detective Vasquez. Cunningham, thought you'd want to know. Catherine Volkova was attacked in prison today. Another inmate, someone whose sister was killed in a similar scheme. Catherine's in the infirmary, but she'll survive. Is she pressing charges? Against a fellow prisoner? Where's she going to go? More jail? Vasquez chuckled darkly. No, but it's a reminder that even in prison, there's a kind of justice. She's not safe, even locked away. That's going to be her life now, looking over her shoulder, never knowing when someone will come for her. Good, Brett said simply. She should know fear. She should know what it's like to be targeted, to be helpless. Maybe for the first time in her life, she'll understand what she put her victims through. You've become harder, Vasquez observed. I'm not sure if that's good or bad. I've become realistic. I've seen true evil, and I know now that some people don't deserve mercy. They deserve exactly what they get. After hanging up, Brett pulled up the file he'd maintained, the complete record of Catherine and Rich's crimes. It was over 1,000 pages now, compiled from investigations, trials, testimonies. The definitive account of their criminal enterprise. He'd been contacted by several publishers interested in turning it into a book. The full story, from his perspective. He was considering it, not for the money or fame, but because it could serve as a warning. A way to help others recognize the signs of predators, to protect themselves. Maybe that would be his next project. After the Foundation was fully established, after the trials were completely finished. For now, though, Brett had other priorities. He closed the file and opened a new document. Cunningham Foundation Annual Report. He began typing, documenting the work they'd done, the lives they'd touched, the future they were building. From the ashes of betrayal, he was creating something meaningful, something that would outlast the pain, the trauma, the nightmare of Catherine Volkova. He was creating a legacy. As night fell over Chicago, Brett Cunningham worked in his office, no longer a victim, but a victor. No longer someone who'd merely survived, but someone who'd transformed his survival into purpose. Catherine had tried to destroy him. Instead, she'd forged him into something stronger, someone capable of protecting others from predators like her. In trying to end his life, she'd given it new meaning. And that, Brett thought with grim satisfaction, was the ultimate revenge. She'd spend her life in a cage while he spent his making the world safer, better, stronger. She'd lost everything. He'd gained a mission. The nightmare was over. The future was beginning. And Brett Cunningham was exactly where he needed to be, standing tall, unbowed, ready to face whatever came next with the strength of someone who'd stared death in the face and emerged victorious. The hunt had ended. The healing had begun. And justice, true justice, had been served. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.